What's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside Bracketology, your NCAA tournament home. No, I'm kidding. It's Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak. You know, we are in March Madness, but right now there's been a little bit of Saints madness, I guess you would say, with a little free agency news and gearing up for that NFL draft right around the corner. There is no offseason, as we always love to say, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could definitely host a March Madness podcast for these next few weeks. Like it's going to take everything within me to not annoy the hell out of people just by talking about the NCAA tournament in these podcasts. I will do my absolute best. But if UConn upsets Florida, then there will be no stopping me from talking about it. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. If every game UConn wins, the more insufferable I will be. So if that's all you need to root against UConn, go for it. But all right,
bring on the haters.
Yes, the hater. If you ain't got no haters, and you ain't popping, as you can see. Now, I'll say in advance, work's getting done on my porch outside. So if you hear some noises and kind of annoying sounds, I apologize in advance. I'm going to try to keep my line muted when I'm not talking, so there's nothing coming through. We have kind of a lull right now, so you won't be hearing it, but when you hear it, you will know. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that in advance. Apologize for any noise. Want to get this done now rather than wait for however long it would take, but that's why I'm wearing headphones that are in the wrong ears. So there it goes. Now we're on. So you can probably hear that. But hey,
man, it's just 2025 being 2025, Jeff.
It's just life in a construction zone. This, if you remember Hurricane Zeta in 2020. That's when my porch got messed up. So they waited 5 years and decided to do this at exactly the time that we were planning to record a podcast. But hey, you know, what is it if not just, I don't know. I'm super annoyed that this is happening. Anyway, so we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the Saints free agency, what's gone on since the last time we recorded, a few signings, a few pay cuts. So we'll talk about the salary cap space. You know, I want to talk about some takeaways. You've been talking to some of these guys on Sports Talk. We've heard from Juwan Johnson, Justin Reed, Devon Godshaw. We're going to have a few more interviews today. Velus Jones we talked to, Will Clapp. So it'll be a lot of good stuff. But, you know, okay, so what is your kind of read on the Saints free agency to this point? We're going to get into that. And then second segment, third segment, we're going to do some mock drafts. So it's been a while since we've done one. This is only going to be our second one. Yeah. It'll be kind of a post-free agency mock draft where we can establish, okay, what has changed, if anything, in terms of how we're looking at some of these positions, some of these team needs, and go from there. But, okay, so what is your kind of read early on in free agency at this point?
You know, the Saints doing what they can to, you know, get some depth on the roster. I don't think there's any, you know, huge signings except for the Justin Reed, bringing him aboard, I think is a huge get, and really like the guy, hearing him speak. You know, you can tell the football IQ there, and that is excited to be home. And I just want people obviously excited to be in uniform here. The biggest surprise, I would think, for me is the amount of money that they were given to Juwan Johnson. I like Juwan. I just think that it was a pretty high number considering he's dealt with some injuries and is largely had the flashes, but as a consistent threat just really hasn't been there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of understated, right? Like the Saints haven't really done a ton. So the moves they've made since the last time we recorded, you know, they're not going to blow anyone away because they've really only signed a bunch of one-year contracts. You know, they signed Ike Adam to a 3-year, $9 million deal, but that's a pretty low-level contract. They also signed Will Clapp, who guys will remember. Obviously, he was a Saints draft pick way back in the 2018 season, I think. You know, he played here for several years. Went to the Chargers in free agency, spent a good chunk of last year with the Bills, played mostly center. So I think he's coming back primarily as a center play. He said he hasn't had his position established yet, so could be guard. And that's because guard is really the position that you're looking at as, okay, this is where the Saints have a need. But, I mean, is he really a guy you're going to bring in and say, hey, you played like 200 and something snaps your entire career at guard. Now you're going to be our starting left guard. I don't think so. Yeah, you're looking at Nick Saldiveri. You're looking at Landon Young, who they re-signed as a potential guard option. But looking at, to me, I don't think you have a guard on your roster right now, or at least a starting left guard on your roster. I don't know how you could look at Nick Saldiveri and say that's definitely our guy considering his health history to this point. So, we're going to do mock drafts, and that's going to be looming large and definitely in mine. I don't know about yours, but if you're looking at the guard spot now, it's like, hey, you could go out and sign somebody. You could bring in a guy like last year you brought in Lucas Patrick, but I have to be looking at that either that number 40 pick or that first third round pick and saying, okay, who's the top interior line prospect available on offense? Because that's got to be high on your radar.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioning the offensive line, I don't have an issue at all bringing in some upper echelon competition for a guy like Trevor Penning.
It's going to be, yeah. I mean, if I bring in somebody at 9 as a tackle, yeah, he's going to be a competition for Trevor. But like, you could say, hey, I want to move Trevor inside, but that can't be your plan. That can't be like, well, we can try him out at guard
either.
It does. That's not top of their agenda, right?
Right.
So it can't possibly be their plan for the starting left guard spot. Now, you could try it. You can move him inside and see how he handles it, but you can't go into this offseason saying like that's option A, right? If that's option C and it works out, fantastic, but that can't be option A. We'll talk a little bit more about Juwan Johnson. I just want to get through some of the other signings. So Saints brought in Velus Jones and they signed him as a running back. Now he was at in college, he played his final year at Tennessee. He was a wide receiver. He was actually teammates and roommates with Alontae Taylor at Tennessee, so they know each other well. But last year, if you watched Hard Knocks for the Bears, there was a whole, arc of him transitioning from wide receiver to running back because, it's a position he played coming up. He's a little bigger than you would expect for a running back. It's like 6'2". So I don't know what his upside really is, but he's going to be in the running back room, not the wide receiver room. The Saints did bring back a wide receiver. I guess not bring back, but they reworked the contract of Cedric Wilson, which we talked about this previously. The Saints could have cut him outright and saved $2.4 million against the salary cap. Instead, they opted to rework his deal, saves about half that. But as we talked about, this is a guy who, once you hired Kellen Moore, his status on this roster felt like it changed dramatically because this is a guy who played 4 years on the Cowboys with Kellen Moore as a coach, 3 as the offensive coordinator, also a Boise State guy. So that connection probably didn't hurt. So Cedric Wilson's going to be back in your wide receiver room. A couple others, Jonah Williams, defensive tackle you brought in, and the Saints have saved some money with contract restructures or reworked deals, I should say, pay cuts for guys like Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu. Taysom Hill is still on the table there, but that's kind of where we are. Is there anything from that list that jumps out at you?
Well, right off the bat, I just laughed when you mentioned Taysom Hill because it was like all those reports he's getting cut by the Saints, and we were like, no, he's not.
Yeah, I never thought it was kind of a cut situation. Now, if you wouldn't take a pay cut, you'd probably consider doing something. So we'll see. I mean, there still hasn't been a pay cut reported. I kind of felt like going in that these pay cuts were going to be something that kind of worked down the line. And if I'm looking at Taysom's contract, I want to make sure he's healthy. I want to make sure he's going to get back on the field with that knee injury before I do anything that's going to guarantee any more money down the line, right? Like, you can change like salary, guaranteed salary into incentives, but you still have to account for that somewhere, right? So we'll see how it goes. But Landon Young's an interesting guy to me, and I know a lot of people are like, who cares about Landon Young? He does something that is valuable for NFL teams, which is he's willing to go in and play any position and look bad doing it. And I mean that positively. I don't mean that as a negative thing. I mean that as like when you are that swing tackle, I still call it the James Hurst role. You are expected to know how to play every position other than center. You are expected to go in there at the drop of a hat with no prep and honestly not a ton of reps in practice. And you're expected to play reasonably well. And in most cases, you're going to struggle or they're going to attack you because they know you're the weak link. And you're just going to have to go in there and just take that. And, that's a thankless job, right? But he's willing to do it, and he'll get better at it. He never played guard in his career prior to last season. And suddenly he's in there starting multiple games at guard. He's a tackle. He came into the league as a tackle. So, I think that's a guy that you want to have. Like James Hurst, I never liked the idea of him being the starter, like your starting left tackle or your starting left guard. But I did like the idea of having him around.
Yeah, in a pinch, he was fine.
So I kind of like that signing. They signed him to a 1-year deal. He's the guy the Saints drafted in the 6th round 4 years ago. He makes a lot of sense.
The more I read about the other tight end that they inked to, Jack Stoll, just like the fact that he's really been I don't want to say a dominant, but he's known for his run blocking abilities. And shoot, I know Alvin Kamara and crew love that for sure.
Yeah, he's kind of more of an H-back than a receiving tight end. You think of guys like Nick Vannett, guys who are here for a reason. Josh Hill, right?
Yeah,
like they're here to block, and that's what Jack Stoll is going to be. You play a lot in the 12, play a lot out of 12 in Kellen Moore's offense, so you're going to get 2 tight ends on the field a lot, and one of those is going to be your receiving tight end, one of those is going to be your blocking tight end. And so if I'm Jack Stoll, I'm trying to beat out Foster. Because I don't think Foster is necessarily a great blocker.
And he's not healthy right now, as far as we know.
Foster Moreau?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
He was banged up at the end of the year.
You're right. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, he had a pretty nasty knee injury at the end of the year. So yeah, who knows where he's at health wise?
We already mentioned Taysom. We don't know.
That had completely left my mind until you mentioned it, because it was so late in the year. It was like the last drive of the season that he kind of rolled off the field, that last drive in Tampa Bay. So yeah, I mean, who knows where he's at? That's a good point. So hey, we'll see how this goes. But going back to what you said about Juwan, it is a little surprising to see the Saints drop 3 years, $30 million on Juwan. But I don't know. Like, people are saying it's an overpay. If you look at the salary rankings for tight ends, it's like 12th, $10 million a year. So it's really not that far outside of the realm of like where a guy who led you in receiving, he caught 50 passes, 548 yards, 3 touchdowns last year. That yardage total was 15th among tight ends. So he's kind of right there in that range. Like, some guys around him are Dawson Knox, Noah Fant. Like, I put him right up there with those guys. So I don't know. I don't think the contract is outside the realm of like reasonability of what you should have expected. Evan Engram got a 2-year, $23.5 million contract with the Broncos. I think the Broncos were in on Juwan Johnson. So they were going to pay him in that range as well, because that's how much. I mean, Evan Engram's 30 years old. People weren't talking about him as a star tight end when he went to the Jaguars at the same age Juwan Johnson is now. So, I don't have an issue with how much they paid him, because I think the gamble there is, hey, this is a guy who's played 3 seasons as a tight end in his career, really. I mean, you look at his rookie season, he was a wide receiver. You look at his second season, he was converting from wide receiver to tight end. So I think you kind of give him a pass from a developmental perspective. Like, people look at Juwan and say, oh, he's not good enough. I look at Juwan and say he's one of the best success stories in NFL history of a guy changing positions once he got to the league and having an impact, right? Like, that doesn't happen that often. Like, look around the NFL and show me all the players that changed positions at the NFL level and actually had success. It doesn't happen that often. So he's kind of in uncharted territory from tight end is probably the position where it happens the most, because, quarterbacks who don't really fit the mold switch to tight end, maybe a bigger wide receiver like Juwan. It's rarely going to go the other way where you come in as a tight end and change to a wide receiver. There was a Jaguars, Matt something. I can't remember his name. He was a quarterback for a while, came in and switched to wide receiver. Ryan Tannehill was a wide receiver who switched to quarterback in his last year. I think he was at Texas A&M. So he's an example of a guy who went the other direction. But I don't know. Like, I see Juwan, and when you see the flashes of what he can do, you're betting that he's going to be able to do that more consistently.
I guess maybe more of the surprise was that the Kellen Moore regime was willing to do that and not going on to Denver with Sean Payton, who's been there, done that with him.
Yeah, I think it's more that Kellen sees the vision of what he can do in that offense and so like he believes that he can get more out of him. Yeah. Right. Like, you look at Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert only played 10 games last year. He had 42 catches for about 500 yards. His, the biggest game he had was against the Saints. He had 10 catches for 170 yards in that game. That long catch at the end that, from the busted coverage. But even without that, it was like 9 catches for 100 yards. Pretty big game for a tight end. So I don't know. Like, I see Juwan. I see a guy who's motivated, who puts in the work. He's trying to be an all-around tight end. Like, that's when I look at an Evan Engram, I see a guy who is who has been and is very satisfied with being a receiving tight end, being basically a wide receiver who plays tight end. Right. And that's what has always held him back in my eyes of like, I can't have him on my roster and say, I don't need another guy who's going to go in there every time we want to run the ball. Right. Like, sure, he can be a dynamic receiver. He can make some incredible catches. He can also have some of the worst drops you've ever seen in your life. There was a game against the Eagles. The Giants had one, and all I had to do is like the easiest catch. It's right in your hand. It drops it. And it's like, oh, okay, so you can make fantastic catches, but you can't make easy hands catches. Whereas when I see Juwan, I see a player who's motivated to be an all-around tight end, who has gotten better as a blocker, who has worked on getting bigger and transitioning from the wide receiver body he came in with to the tight end body he has now. He looks completely different from a physical perspective from when he walked in the building. So I don't know. Like I see it as a calculated gamble that you are buying the best 3 years Juwan Johnson has to offer.
Yeah, and he's definitely not past his prime.
He's 28. So it's kind of there toward the edge of like, okay, are you past your prime? But I think the tread on his tires is a lot lower than a guy like Noah Fant, for example, who came in as a first round tight end, played tight end his whole career. He was getting a full workload from day one, whereas Juwan really didn't get a full workload as a tight end until like 2 years ago. So, he has dealt with some injuries, but I think from a physical perspective, he's got a lot. Like Michael Turner is a good example as a running back. He was LaDainian Tomlinson, a different LT. He was LaDainian Tomlinson's backup with the Chargers for so many years. And he went to the Falcons and he was like 26 years old. And like, that's a little old for a running back, but he had, the tread on his tires left. He hadn't really gotten that much run at the NFL level. So he showed up on the Falcons and he was an elite running back for years that you would almost look at normally and say, you don't see running backs pick up speed at this point. You see them trying to maintain. But I think that's what you have with Juwan is at his age 28 year, he's more like a guy that you would say is like, it's kind of like his 25-year-old season. So I don't know. Like, I think the weird thing for me is how many people out there seem to be complaining and not rooting for Juwan to reach the potential that you've seen him flash. Because, like, how can you not watch him and see the potential, right? The reason people are upset is because he shows the potential and you don't see it all the time. So, like, I'm not sure I understand this idea that people are so mad about a $10 million a year contract that they're not rooting for him to make that contract the steal, which he very much can. If he goes out and catches 70 passes for 800 yards and 7 touchdowns next year, that contract is a steal, right? That's all it takes. You're not that far off. So I don't know. I have no issue with the contract. I still think they should go and draft a tight end because it's a 3-year deal. It's not like you're signing this guy to like an 8-year contract. It's a 3-year deal. That's really a 2-year deal. So if he delivers on it, fantastic. It's a great gamble. If he doesn't, it's really not that big of a splash in the bucket when you look at it in the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the fact that this new regime was willing to stick with the guy that's been around here in a developmental piece around Dennis Allen and, Sean Payton, Pete Carmichael, it definitely says a lot to me about the player Juwan is.
Yeah, and it was interesting. So he did mention there's several teams that were in on him. So it's like if you think the Saints overpaid, then okay, well these other teams were very interested, right? So it's not like they just threw a contract at him and didn't have to compete with anyone else. And they were bidding against themselves. Like Sean was very interested. Clint Kubiak and the Seahawks were interested. And it's what Juwan said was basically like, hey, it was. I was wrestling with this. Like, this was a difficult thing. He wanted to stay here. He really loves it here. He said he has 2 young kids. Both were born here. This was a team that took a chance on him out of college and then converted him from wide receiver to tight end, worked with him, invested in him. He feels connected to this team. He wanted to stay. But at the same time, that's not always in your control. And okay, what if the vision here isn't what I need it to be and I can move on and have better success elsewhere? So he was kind of wrestling with this. And it was a couple days before he signed that contract. And he apparently couldn't sleep. So he called Kellen Moore at like 11:30 at night. And, Kellen picked up. Kellen answered, talked to him for about a half hour and kind of put him at ease in that situation. And then he eventually went and signed that contract. So I just think that's a kind of an interesting story of like, a lot of times that's what it is. It's like commitment. It's belief that the coach is on you is where you need him to be. The wavelength is the same, so that you can go out and play your best football. And so if Kellen says, I'm tired, I'm not answering this call right now, I'll call back in the morning, who knows how that's received? Maybe that comes off as, they're not committed to me, and I need to go and find someone who is. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting anecdote.
That too, it's like if you're Kellen Moore and the phone's ringing 11 o'clock at night, you're like, oh shit, what's going on with my player here? What trouble are they in?
Yeah, it's true. Like, does he need me to bail him out from jail or something? Obviously,
although 11's kind of early still, I guess, for trouble.
Like my phone goes on do not disturb at 10 o'clock. Like if someone were to call me, they would have to call me a second time to get it to ring. That's how that works. I don't know if people know who do not disturb works on iPhones. Anyway, like if you called me, my phone would have just gone straight to voicemail. So it'd be like, this guy doesn't care. So thankfully, Kellen doesn't have his phone on do not disturb. But like that's one of the reasons I'm okay with the extensions to him and Chase Young, which I haven't really talked about. We talked about it in the previous episode.
Yeah.
Is that the Saints have been very judicious with how they've handed out money in this offseason cycle, and that's how they should be operating. It drives me nuts when I see people saying they should rebuild, but also I can't believe they didn't go sign Cooper Kupp. I can't believe they didn't drop $15 million a year on this 30-year-old wide receiver who hasn't played more than 12 games in 3 years. Like
he's a legacy guy. His dad's up in the rafters in the Superdome. Or his
a legacy guy.
Sorry,
he is a legacy guy. You're right, and I would have loved to see him in the Saints uniform, not at $15 million a year.
Agreed.
Not for a team that everyone seems to agree needs to rebuild and reset from a cap perspective. And then the second a 30-year-old wide receiver who's well past his prime, guys, is available. Like, let's throw caution to the winds. Let's go sign. No, stop. And I think the Saints appreciate that because that's why we haven't really seen anything outside of that Justin Reed deal and those 2 extensions. It's all been low-level contracts. If you look at the comp pick formula right now, they're in line to get a 4th-round comp pick for Paulson Adebo leaving, right? So that'd be an extra 4th-round pick is a significant asset. Like even if it's just something you throw into a trade, like that could be the difference between having to give up a future 3rd or having to give up that 4th-round comp pick that you weren't even banking on going into the season. So, like I think I like the way they have done business right now. And the interesting thing at this point is with Cam Jordan taking a pay cut and all these other kind of moves they have made, they have about $30 million in cap space right now to kind of be going on with, which is a pretty good chunk of change.
I'm curious what else the Saints have in mind. It feels like they're freeing up a lot of this cap space still to make some kind of move.
Yeah, I could see why it looks like that. And I think there's definitely potential for that. I think they need to add a wide receiver. So a guy like Keenan Allen, a guy like Amari Cooper would make a lot of sense. And you kind of look at, okay, what's the number? If you wait until after the draft, it does not factor into the comp pick formula. So if I was advising the Saints, it'd be like, you can go sign somebody, just wait a couple months. Like, what's the functional difference between adding someone on March 20th versus adding someone on May 3rd? Like as long as they're still there. Now, if there's a ticking clock on an offer, then that becomes a problem, right? If another team is like going to swoop in and take them and it's a guy you really want, then sure. But if that's not the case, then why wouldn't you protect your comp picks? So that's my first thing. Second thing, keep in mind, you have to sign your draft picks. So that's going to be about $7-8 million, assuming they make all their picks. And then you also have to account for Ryan Ramczyk, who's going to be about $11.8 million against the cap post June 1st. When he inevitably retires. So you're talking about $30 million right now. Really, it's more like $12 million beyond what you would need for kind of just your organizational expenses that will come to play. And you do need some money to operate throughout the season. So $12 million is not, wow, they're going to do something, because you could probably sign somebody, but it's not. The $30 million makes it sound like, well, they're just gearing up for something big. And in reality, I think there's 1 or 2 medium-sized moves left to make.
I mean, there's really nothing big, quote unquote, to make right now with the who's left on the market.
No, right. There's not a ton of guys left available. And that's why I think the draft is going to be important to figure out what those needs are. Like if you go out and draft a left guard with your 40th pick, kind of feels like, hey, we've got this figured out, right?
That's where you went there. It's like, that's what I'd be interested in. What is available on the free agent market in the interior O line right now. Not really, Amari Cooper and, whatever else is out there wide receiver wise doesn't get me going at all.
No, No. And, one other thing I want to talk about. So Cam Jordan redid his contract. And I know it wasn't something he was a big fan of in the process of like, hey, I want to make my money. I don't want to give back my money. But he did redo his contract, saved him Saints about $6 million in terms of they dumped his base salary down, but they added incentives. This is what Cam said on his podcast, Off the Edge, about this process. At least this is a clip of what he said. It's a 25-minute kind of stream of consciousness rant where he goes over a lot. But this was a kind of a tidbit of what he said on the podcast.
I have to go, I will go. And, ranted a little bit. I was like, look, like, I'm still under contract. This is where I should be. My contract says, I got another year on it. So unless they cut me, I'm not leaving, or I'm not taking a pay reduction. And I was like, after talking about it, I'm like, look, I want to win. And at the end of the day, do I really want to go somewhere for the next 2 years, next 3 years? Maybe just this year. But when you think about, the teams available, it's like, oh yeah, I would so leave. But is it worth it? Family loves it here. The community work that I do here has been detrimental. It's a part of me. It's such a big part of me. To walk around in New Orleans and know that you're showing love here, to have the Cam Jordan Foundation take off the way it did this last year, after we changed from God is Love Foundation, to have been in this community for the last 8-9 years. And we're talking about a reduction in salary. I'm like, man, all right, figure it out. But like, don't take too much. So let me fight some back. And so, the contract is what it is.
Yeah, so one thing he said that his community work has been detrimental. I think he meant like instrumental or something like positive. He didn't mean he just misspoke there. I thought that was funny, but I couldn't cut that out of the clip without it would lose the context. So I left it in. But yeah, I thought that was a funny little mental typo that he made.
I mean, the dude is amazing when it comes to, stopping by schools and all the other charity work he does around town. And like, you think of New Orleans Saints and Cam Jordan is definitely pops in your head.
Right. And when you're talking about a guy who, he's like, you're asking to take a pay cut to say like one of the reasons he's going to be willing to do that is because that is very important to him. Right. Like that's such a big part of his DNA of like, I don't want to just abandon this city, this community, because, a couple $1 million are on the table in a situation that who knows how it's going to go for me. Right. Like he talked to Justin Tuck, who left the Giants to go to the Raiders. And he said like Justin had told him like, hey, I probably should have just stayed with the Giants. Like it was a better situation. It didn't work out for me and with the Raiders. So it's like, he doesn't want to go anywhere cold. He repeated that stance that he told me a couple years ago, which is like the Browns could offer me all the money in the world. I'd be like, no. Thanks, but no thanks. And also not thanks that much because y'all suck.
I was definitely thinking maybe a team like Arizona would come a call in for him.
Well, sure. I mean, like it could be out there, but at the end of the day, he decided it's not worth it. I'm going to take that pay cut. I'm going to work with him, but also at the same time, like, hey, let's see how much we can scrape back. And so the interesting to me is the incentives, right? So he has incentives in his contract. So at this point, it's like 5 sacks and above. Every sack is worth $300,000 in incentives. So I think that's going to be a kind of a fun subplot to watch. If and I think he played pretty well at the end of the season. We'll see how he works in this Brandon Staley system. Maybe you kind of have a rebirth in a different role, and suddenly you're talking about like, hey, if you get to like week 11 and you get that 5th sack, suddenly every sack after that's going to be like cha-ching. Like they should have a cha-ching sound effect in the Superdome, because literally, that 6th sack. That's worth $300,000 to me, right?
Hello.
So if someone comes in and like steals a half sack, I think he'd be kind of annoyed, right? There was a story that one time he called the league to get a sack changed from I can't remember who. It might have been Sheldon Rankins or somebody, but to get like a sack that he felt like was his got credited to somebody else, and he actually called the league for a stat correction.
Wow.
And so like if you thought he was kind of finicky about that before, $300,000 are along the line for these, like, because we've seen teams like funnel Emmanuel Sanders. Remember, Emmanuel Sanders had that roster incentive in week 18 or week 17. I think they might not have had 18 games at that point. It was against the Panthers. They just force fed him targets in a game that really didn't matter until he got that incentive. Right now, it's like take that, and then like every single sack you get. I don't know. You might be working. I think that's a good idea for a veteran player to have that in their contract. So I'm glad he was amenable to that. There's also a playtime incentive. So if he plays an X percent of the snaps, you get $300,000 for each tier up. So that's another one that's like, okay, let's see if he can get there. But, I think it was it's cool that he's willing to do that. It's a team first move, which, whether you should expect a guy to be team first or not, he's willing to do it. But the team also had leverage in terms of, hey, we could just move on. So, that's a factor. Either way,
I definitely respect the hell of the fact that he's like, I could go somewhere, but do I really want to? And he wants to win.
Yeah.
But it's like, unless they're saying, they're closing the door on Cam, he's not forcing his way out of New Orleans.
No, and one thing that might have forced him out of New Orleans would be if the Saints stuck with a position coach that he is not a particularly big fan of. And this is what he had to say about some guy, I think maybe Guy McGuy, I think. Well, let's hear it.
But I'm excited. I mean, of course, Brian Young comes back and, he did a hell of a job taking over from, I almost said Bum Dadada. Guy McGuy, that was a former D coordinator, X's and O's guy. Jack. Oh, just the guy with the pen and somehow an ability to put a pass rush plan together. Anyways, glad we've moved on from that.
Venting.
Todd Grantham is who he's referring to there, in case you're wondering.
Guy McGuy.
AKA Guy McGuy, with a pen and an inability to put a pass rush plan together. So if you thought like, hey, he does, like, there was a point last year that he was willing to demand a trade because he was so fed up with Todd Grantham. And Darren Rizzi, one of his first moves, because I don't think Cam was alone in that. I think it was very much a wide felt like this is not working. Darren Rizzi's one of his first moves. He had two first moves. One was to make Alvin Kamara captain. The other one was to get Tom Grantham out of the defensive line room. And I think both were brilliantly correct. Because you saw 2 games later, they had 8 sacks against Jaden Daniels. It was like they had a new lease on life. Anyway, so
I think
that's a big
Cam,
part.
We got to make Cam a Guy McGuy t-shirt for Christmas.
Yeah. But no, he also had a good take on Isaiah Foskey that I want to bring back at a later point. But because he said basically what I said, which is he's going into year 3. We don't know what we don't know yet. Anyway. But all right, that's all I have from a rundown perspective. Anything else you wanna hit before we move on to the mocks?
I'm not sure if we mentioned it last time, but happy trails, Peyton Turner. Best of luck to you in Dallas, sir.
I'm rooting for him.
That position, you're right. The defensive end position really didn't get banged up. I know Passanio was really the casualty at the beginning of the year.
The 1 year Peyton Turner's healthy, everyone on the defensive line is healthy, right? Not any opportunities to showcase anything. I that would frustrate me just in the sense of it's my contract year and I don't really get any opportunities, but second round pick didn't get any opportunities either. So we'll see. I think a lot of things are going to change. He didn't really fit a 3-4 anyway. So I don't think he would have been back regardless once you went that route. But good luck in Dallas. We'll see how it goes. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to hit some mock drafts. We're going to make them as quick as possible because we went really long on this segment. And then we'll come back with my mock draft. So we'll do his mock draft, Steve's mock draft, and then my mock draft. And then we'll leave. And then we'll come back and talk more and more and more about this as the offseason progresses. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. The sanding has stopped, thankfully. So we can, for now.
Yeah, lunch break.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably is a lunch break now that I mention it. All right. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. And it's mock draft season. We haven't done as many of them as we would have typically at this point because it just feels like there's been news and whatnot that has continued to crop up. But this will be mock draft 2.0. It will be a 3-round mock. So we won't be going through every pick that's made the way we did the last time with the 2-round mock because there's just not enough time to do it. We'll go through the first round in the sense of okay, the picks off the board prior to your pick. And we'll mention a few as we go through the rest, some notable ones. But, we're mostly just going to stick to the picks that were made because there are 4 of them to go through. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. So,
like we said before getting into this, though, breaking news, folks, PFF hates Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, if we use Pro Football Focus to set these, so we have Pro Football Focus make all the non-Saints picks, and they set the board. And yeah, since the last time we did a mock draft, Shedeur Sanders has fallen drastically down Pro Football Focus's boards, and I think that's probably indicative of reality to some extent. I don't know if it's as significant as they're making it. He was on the board in the second round of both of our mocks, which is kind of strange, but yeah, we'll see. Either way, let's share yours up here. And we will get to it off the bat. Let's just start. I'll just go through the first 8 picks, and because I don't think there's a ton to talk about. Like obviously, as we mentioned, Shedeur Sanders is not here anymore. He was up there in the first mock that we did. He is now way down the board. But Cam Ward to the Titans at number 1 overall. I think Cam Ward's going to go number 1 overall. It's just a question of
if it's the Titans, right?
So. I still think the Giants are going to trade up from 3. Like, if the Titans desperately want Cam Ward, then they're going to get Cam Ward. Obviously, it's their decision to make. But they're going to have to turn down, in my opinion, a pretty significant offer from the Giants, because you can then draft at 3 and get Abdul Carter, right? Because that's who the Giants took at 3. Either way, Cam Ward number 1. The Browns take Travis Hunter at number 2. So a lot of Colorado going on. Abdul Carter to the Giants at number 3. No major surprises. Armand Membu to the Patriots.
A little high right here.
It does seem a little high. And, he has been flying up board, so I wouldn't be stunned to see him go high in the draft. To have him go all the way at 4 would feel like a pretty steep jump. And so I think what you've seen since the last time we did a mock draft, a lot of opinions have changed. Obviously, the combine happened. Membu had a great combine, I believe, based on... It's tough because what is a great combine, right? Like it's, like he ran around really well and, so interviews and whatnot, but we don't really know what happened in the interviews. And anyway, so this draft has Armand Membu at number 4, Mason Graham to the Jaguars at number 5, Ashton Genty to the Raiders at number 6.
Not like his stock was low, but I feel like he's definitely gained a lot of momentum where a lot of folks are thinking that Genty won't even be around for the Saints at 9.
We'll see. I mean, it's always tough to gauge.
Yeah, right.
It seems like every year teams change their tune on, running backs and the value. I do think if there was a year that a running back was going to jump up, it would probably be this one, just because we've seen suddenly the value of running backs and Josh Jacobs with the Packers and Saquon Barkley with the Eagles. But like teams will forget that the reason those guys are on those teams is because the teams that drafted them don't have them anymore, right? So anyway, Derrick Henry with the Ravens, but like again, those are free agent signings. So if you're looking at them and be like, "Oh, we need that running back as the key," it's not. Raiders to Ashton Genty. Now that you have Geno Smith, maybe you start to build around him even more. Obviously you took Brock Bowers. But anyway, I don't know. We'll see. Ashton Genty to the Raiders at 6. Will Campbell to the Jets at number 7. Michael Williams to the Panthers at number 8. And up at number 9. Ding. I've gotten better at it.
The New Orleans Saints select wide receiver from Arizona State, Ted McMillan. Arizona, not Arizona State.
Arizona.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I got the other running back, though, later on from Arizona State. My bad.
You don't spoil it. What are you doing? Gosh. Where's the suspense? Where's your sense of drama? Anyway, Ted McMillan, what, why? Tell me why.
I just feel like with the moves they've made so far, what stood out to me that was on the board at the time was just McMillan right at the top there staring at me. Huge target for this offense. The Saints have a guy, Chris Olave, who could use, a compadre there on the outside. And I think you could put Rashid Shaheed then back as a number 3 receiver. And I just feel like McMillan can be an all-pro. And I don't think he's going to need this developmental time in the NFL. I think it can be an instant impact for this team and just a valuable piece for an offensive coach in Kellen Moore, who I think would do wonders with him. And it would be, more and more I think about it, excited about this pick coming to New Orleans. I think Saints fans need to be immediate who dat favorite.
Yeah, I think one of the things you have going for you when you're talking about a big-bodied wide receiver is that's one of the skill sets that tends to transfer immediately. Like with the smaller guys, you have to adjust to the physicality and the pace and some of the complex route designs. You can run a goal line fade, right? Like I hate goal line fades, end zone fades, but like the skill set is there. Like using that big body is there, and he does it well. That's what I like about him, is he plays to his size well. And he's also got the athleticism. I think if he's on the board, it's going to be really tough to say no, in part because it's like, hey, you don't have a guy like that. Like you don't have a physical receiver who you can just throw to in a phone booth and he's going to go up and get it. He's going to go win. So I could definitely see that. And the other thing that, you're looking at here is, okay, Ashton Genty's off the board. So if you were an Ashton Genty lover, he's gone. Will Campbell's off the board. Mason Graham's off the board. Armand Membu,
who I thought would be around for the Saints.
Membu?
Yeah,
right. So he's off the board. 2 tackles are off the board. So you can't even say like, well, I want to get the top tackle. Well, he's not there. So I think the way this shaped up, unless you were big on Shamar Stewart or Tyler Warren, who are the next 2 picks.
I thought you were going to go with another SS and Shedeur Sanders.
No, yeah. Well, I mean, Shedeur is a whole other conversation, and quarterback's a whole other conversation. Mel Kiper has the Saints taking Jackson Dart at number 9. So, and he seems pretty confident in that. But I don't see it either way. That's the question here. What do you want? Do you want a tight end? I don't think number 9 is the spot where you really want to be going after a tight end as good as Tyler Warren is. Do you want an edge rusher? Michael Williams, if he was your guy, he's gone. Shamar Stewart, not the production that you probably want to see in college isn't there, but the athleticism is. So I don't know. I think it could go a few different ways.
Campbell was definitely on my limited, my board when I'm looking at things that were left when the Saints run the clock, just because I feel like that's still a big need for this Saints defense.
Yeah, and he's a guy who can move inside, outside, which I think finding guys who can both play linebacker and rush the passer, right, who can drop into coverage and rush the passer is going to be something that over the next few years you have to look at a lot more, assuming you stick with this Brandon Staley defense for the course of several seasons. And so, yeah, he's the guy who NFL.com, Daniel Jeremiah had going to the Saints in his most recent mock. Okay. So there is some idea that would make sense. Like I said, Tyler Warren went to the 49ers with the 11th pick. Shamar Stewart went to the Bears with the 10th pick. Mike Green out of Marshall went to the Colts with the 14th pick.
Question with the PFF picking. I mean, obviously you don't have the answer, but it's like, would the Niners really do that with Kittle?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think that this mock draft system is really worried about players on teams. It's kind of just figuring it out, but probably not. I think when you have a guy like Kittle, you probably would focus on a different position. But either way, Jahdae Barron goes to the Dolphins at 13. A guy who's kind of flying up boards that I find interesting is Nick Almanwari out of South Carolina. He goes to the Falcons. He's probably the most athletic player in the draft. Pretty high for a safety. Will Johnson, who's fallen down a little bit, cornerback out of Michigan, went to the Cardinals with the 16th pick. Another edge rusher, 2 edge rushers in a row. Donovan Izaraku, Boston College, goes to the Bengals at 17. Jalen Walker goes to the Seahawks at number 18.
I feel like Walker's kind of gone down there a bit.
Yeah, I think you see some sliding up and down with these guys. Kenneth Grant goes to the Bucks at 19. And we're kind of going through. Tyler Booker is the top guard off the board. Goes to the Texans out of Alabama. I don't think the Saints are going to be in on him because he's got like one of the lowest RAS scores I've ever seen in my life. He's like in the 3s. Like Tyler Booker, his RAS score, like let's find it.
Not the Riz, the Raz.
The Raz. He scored at a 3.93 out of 10 on the RAS. He's got long arms. He ran a 5.38 40-yard dash. I'm pretty sure I could run a 5.38 40-yard dash.
He was just throwing it in that day.
Yeah. His explosion grade is bad. Is he's got good size and that's about it. But at 6'4", 321, I kind of want to see more than 21 reps on the bench press. Anyway, so definitely, I think for better or worse, the Saints would typically be looking at athleticism metrics for their offensive line spots. We've seen that. Like that's been very well documented, and I don't think that that's going to change for Tyler Booker. So seeing him go off the board as a guy who wants an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman, I don't mind that. But let's go further. So Luther
Pierce
Burden
was another popular pick for the Saints for a while.
Who?
James Pierce from Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, edge rusher is going to be a popular pick, and I'd still be surprised if they don't get an edge rusher. To be completely honest, Shadur in this mock is the first pick in the second round, so that's the Drew Brees slot, if you will.
Cleveland with Travis Hunter and Shadur. Go Browns.
Yeah, that would be kind of a fun, Amazon Prime series that I'm sure they'd put together. Anyway, Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Ohio State, goes to the Titans. He's high on my board. Gray Zabel, North Dakota State. He's listed as a tackle, but I think he's an interior line guy, so he would be a guy the Saints, I think, would be looking at. If he got all the way to 36, you might trade up a couple spots to try to get him. Josh Connerly, another tackle, goes off the board at 38 to the Patriots. Nick Scourton, edge rusher, goes to Texas A&M. This would be a drop for him. So, I think if the Saints don't go edge rusher in the first round, if this guy's on the board at 39, it's another situation where Patriots, maybe you want to make a call. But the problem is you don't know. You don't know if the Bears are going to take him. Either way, we are on to the Saints' second round pick. Ding, 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 ding.
From the University of South Carolina, defensive tackle TJ Sanders going to the black and gold. Get some interior D-line help, please.
What about TJ Sanders you like?
Big dude, really solid against the run, and I just feel like, pass rush will still be something to work on. But no, he's given it all he can every play too. Just a high motor kind of guy.
Yeah, 6'3", 297. He's not really a nose tackle build. So he'd be kind of a defensive end pick. He could probably get a little bigger. He might be able to fit in there. It's tough for me to know what they're going to prioritize at this point in the defensive.
Right after him, the Bears getting Tyleek. That was someone I was going back and forth between TJ and Tyleek, honestly.
Yeah, say what you want about any of these guys. I think defensive tackle is something that the Saints are going to be looking at in this draft. Like they did trade for Devon Gotcha, so you have you don't need to draft a guy who's going to play on day one, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you still need to kind of find some prospects who can fit into some of those interior line spots for sure. So I like that pick. Passed on Jackson Dart. Could have got Jackson Dart in the second round. You didn't. Not a Jackson Dart guy.
No, even though my son loves Jackson Dart, I'm just not impressed, and we'll see what happens with him in the NFL. I do think he will be a day 2 selection. I don't have him as going in round 1.
Yeah, it's tough. It's hard to believe there isn't going to be a team in the back end of the first round who really likes Jackson Dart. But the problem is
trade up even.
The problem is who's going to make that pick? The Bills don't need a quarterback. The Chiefs don't need a quarterback. The Eagles don't need a quarterback. The Commanders don't need a quarterback. The Lions, maybe. Jared Goff's getting a little older. Ravens don't need.
Still got that kid from Tennessee though.
Hendon Hooker, yeah, but that's not. Sure, maybe, but he's not going to be a reason you don't draft a quarterback. So, the Lions are one of the. I'm just saying, the Lions could be a guy.
Sure, yeah.
The Commanders have a second-year star in Jaden Daniels. Josh Allen is the answer for the foreseeable future, right?
Rams, maybe.
The Rams, yes. The Rams definitely could draft a quarterback given where Matthew Stafford is in his career. Texans, no. Vikings just signed not Sam Darnold.
They got McCarthy still.
The Vikings have McCarthy, and it looks like they might sign Aaron Rodgers. That's that Packers to Jets to Vikings trail might get trod again, which is crazy.
I laugh at folks getting mad at Rodgers going, what's he waiting for?
What's his rush?
Right, exactly. That's
Chargers don't need a quarterback. Steelers could draft a quarterback. Broncos don't need a quarterback. Bucks could draft a quarterback. I don't think they will.
You're right.
Seahawks just signed Kirk Cousins. Not Kirk Cousins.
No.
Sam Darnold.
Right.
Who is essentially Kirk Cousins. Anyway, so Bengals aren't drafting a quarterback.
Right. Maybe there's a team that moves up into the late round of the first to grab Dart, but I don't see him going, honestly, in day 1 of the draft.
Yeah, if the Giants don't get a quarterback in the first round, do they trade up to like 29 and go get him? Same thing with the Browns, which the Browns got Shador. So it's an interesting conversation. Let's fast forward to Xavier Restrepo goes to the Texans at number 58. You passed on Jack Besh, which I'm disappointed in because I want Jack Besh, but
I hear you. And I definitely thought about him, but I had Tet already that I drafted. I was like, I don't need another wide receiver.
Yeah, that's true. I don't. Yeah, if you go wide receiver, you're not going wide receiver. That'd be kind of crazy.
Right.
Landon Jackson goes to the Falcons at 46.
Although you never know, maybe Kellen Moore does.
Yeah, you're in the range here for some interesting running back options. Quinshawn Junkins goes to the Seahawks at 50. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa goes to the Broncos. Junkins? I like Junkins, but I like the other Ohio State running back better, Travion Henderson. I think. Gotcha. So yeah, Braden Swinson at LSU goes to the Packers at 54. Travion Henderson goes to the Panthers at 57. So they're kind of right there. Like I said, Xavier Restrepo, wide receiver out of Miami that I really like, goes to Texans. So let's fast forward to the third round. Jalen Milroe, the first pick of the third round of the Giants, quarterback at Alabama. I think that's a good spot for him.
I think that's a good pick right there. Yeah.
In general, like if you're looking at Jalen Milroe, you should be looking to get him day 2 or day 3, like late day 2, early day 3, third round, fourth round, and develop the hell out of him, and maybe he becomes a guy. Right. If I'm taking him in the second round, I'm reaching. All right. Elijah Arroyo goes off the board right before the Saints pick at number 71. Who's your guy, Steve? Who's your guy?
Well, did Arizona in the first round, and now in this round going Arizona State running back Cam Scatteraboo, dude that's 5'11", 215, can run between the tackles. Also, decent receiver for you. Just love the whole makeup of this cat and think he'd be an awesome addition for Kellen Moore's offense.
Yeah, I do think running back needs to be on your radar. Cam is interesting, and again, another Cam from Arizona. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Go, right?
But yeah, Scatteraboo. He's a fun guy to watch. Definitely
fun name to say too.
I don't know how he fits the offense. He'd be kind of he'd be an interesting complement to Kamara. He'd be a guy that whatever running back you draft, I think you should draft a running back is going to be there pushing Kendre Miller. And if Kendre can't hack it, I think Kendre's done. Like year 2, I think you're guaranteed a spot. Right? Like, I don't think you're going to get cut year 2 for really any reason, unless like you're begging to get cut. Whereas year 3, I think, a lot of that guaranteed money on your contract's gone. Like, if you're not getting it done, the team could move on from you. And so I think that's Kendre Miller. This would be kind of hopefully be a wake up call for him if you take a running back like this. All right, moving on. Kyle Kennard goes off. Yeah, if Kyle Kennard was still on the board in the third round, I'd look at it. I think edge rusher is one that if you can find a prospect on day 2 who could potentially be a mid to high second round pick, I think that would be tough to pass on. Just knowing what you need, your needs at the position. Dylan Sampson, another running back out of Tennessee, goes to the Cowboys. Ozzie Trapilo, whose father played for the Saints, goes to the Patriots, tackle out of Boston College. Moving on, Mason Taylor goes off the board to the Texans at number 79. We're getting closer to the Saints pick, which the Saints pick is the Commanders pick that they traded in the Marshawn Lattimore trade. Chris Paul Jr. went from being a point guard to a linebacker for Ole Miss. Now going on. The problem is you get with 3-round mocks, you get so far down that it's like, I could tell you all these picks, but who knows where they're going to be.
No, right. I agree. That's why with those 7-round mocks, I'm like, I don't know how the hell people do it.
I mean, it's all a guess. Yeah. DJ Giddens at Kansas State goes to the Seahawks, a pick before the Saints. And then at 93, ding, 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 ding. Saints are on the board. Who you got?
We are addressing the offensive line here. Out of West Virginia, Wyatt Millum. And I know he's listed as a tackle. Projecting that, come to the pros, they might decide to move him inside. Definitely a guy I feel like can, those snaps against or helping with the run game and, the pass blocking for him. Feel like, this 6'6", 317 dude could definitely help out along the O-line, looking to develop some help along there. And if it's push Trevor Penning, great. If it's to, you know, fill a role on the interior side of the O-line as well, great. Just looking for, you know, another viable body that can, you know, end up protecting the QB and open up some lanes for that offense.
Yeah, you know, this late in the draft, you know, if you're waiting until your fourth pick to take that offensive lineman, I think you're taking a developmental guy. You know, if you're drafting a guy you expect to start, I think you would end up going earlier. So yeah, I think if you're drafting this guy, if you're drafting Milam, who I don't know a ton about, I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, some of the things I you know, looking up some stats on him, or, you know, the scouting reports. One of the knocks is he's too upright in his stance and could cause some balance issues. But, you know, when he squares his shoulders, he's a good anchor on that O-line.
Yeah, no, and I think you do need to keep adding bodies to that offensive line. But if you're drafting a guy at the end of the third round, is probably a sign that you're going to go try to find somebody to sign, or have already signed somebody, right? Like, I don't think he's your starter, is my point. Now Nick Saldiveri's there; he could be your starter. One of these other guys could win that job, but I don't know. Like, there's going to be enough veteran free agents out there, like a Lucas Patrick, for example.
Yeah,
that I think you do have to go find one of those guys. But all right, so Wyatt Milam is your. Is it Milam? Is it Milam? Do you know? Have you looked it up?
I went with Milam, just going with the LSU baseball player's pronunciation.
Spelled differently, though.
Right.
His is like Milam. Stephen Milam.
Milam, maybe.
Okay. So, the Saints, in your mock, have selected Ted McMillan at number 9 overall, right. The Saints' first pick. TJ Sanders, defensive tackle out of South Carolina, at number 40. Cam Scatabo at number 71, running back out of Arizona State. And then Wyatt Milam, tackle out of West Virginia. PFF gave you an A. The only pick it gave you below an A on was a B- for Milam. I don't know. People will react to grades.
Whatever with the rankings. I was surprised that the pick of Scatabo was an A+.
Yeah, the problem I have with the PFF grades is all you have to do to get an A+ is to take whatever the top option they give you is, because that's like that's what they think, you know. like they're grading you based on their board, but who's to say their board's right?
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I never take the grades like a lot. Like there's some questions I have in these rankings. Like I don't buy a few of them. But either way, let's call that again. Like I said, so Ted McMillan, TJ Sanders, Cam Scatabo, Wyatt Milam. Those are your 4 picks in mock draft 2.0. And we'll come back later on in the offseason and get you 3.0. But for now, let's hit the break, come back, do one more mock draft, and get out of here. Again, this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. One more mock draft segment. I promise this is not going to be as long as the last 2 segments we've already gone through. Because the thing is, like, a lot of the conversations we had about your mock draft would be the same conversations we'll have about my mock draft. So mine is mostly just going to be about the players I drafted specifically, as opposed to the ideas around them. But let's just get right into it. We've been doing this for an hour already. We don't need to hash it out anymore. Let's dive in. Here is my mock. It's starting way down there, so let's scroll up.
I was like, wow, you're starting at pick 46.
Yeah, we're just gonna skip the first 2 picks. No one really cares about those. Everyone wants.
Wow, Genty going even higher here.
Yeah, you're right.
Membo.
Right.
Wow,
and Membu, yeah. Which, you know, the Giants, like, let's just keep taking swings at these tackles until one of them's decent. You know, I guess Andrew Thomas is good, but Evan Neal has been a complete bust for them. Either way, let's get into it. So, as you mentioned, Cam Ward, you know, still number 1. Then some changes. Abdul Carter goes number 2 instead of Travis Hunter, which was your mock. He went to the Browns. In this mock, Abdul Carter goes to the Browns, so they pair Myles Garrett with Abdul Carter. That's going to be a fun pass rush group to watch. Giants take Armand Membu at number 3. Patriots go Ashton Genty at number 4. I don't think that's going to happen, but hey, it's a mock draft for a reason. Travis Hunter goes to the Jags at number 5. Mason Graham to the Raiders, defensive tackle out of Michigan at number 6. Jihad Campbell out of Alabama goes to the Jets. So again, you're in a situation where some of these are different, right? Jihad went after the Saints pick. This time he's not even on the board if the Saints did want him, but that means that different guys are available that were not previously. Will Campbell off the board at number 8. So he is not an option. He would probably been my pick if he was on the board, but he is not. So can you make a sound effect, Steve?
Bada bing, 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 bing.
Nice. All right. At number 9, the New Orleans Saints select Jahdae Barron, cornerback out of Texas. Texas. Yeah. And so, I'm going to be honest. Tet McMillan was still on the board, and I was considering him, but then I saw you pick Tet McMillan, and I picked Tet McMillan in my last mock draft, so I'm not doing it again because the whole point of these is to talk about different players. And, what would cause you to not take Tet McMillan? I don't know. If I really feel like we need a cornerback, and I feel like I have a guy who fits exactly what I need in this new defense. I have great scouting from my defensive pass game coordinator in Terry Joseph, who helped develop Jahdae Barron at Texas. He's going to be a guy that helps a lot. He was out at the combine with the Saints. He joined in immediately upon getting that job. So, there's going to be reasons that you lean toward Jahdae Barron in this situation. He's a bigger guy. He kind of fits the nickel role perfectly. So if your goal is to keep Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside, slot Jahdae Barron into the slot and roll with that, I think it fits. This is a little higher than I would want, right? Like, I think it's a bit of a reach to go with him at number 9, but I mean, I guess you could trade back, but like I've said in the past, like, trade backs are typically not there if a team's not coming up to get a quarterback. So maybe Shedeur Sanders is someone's dream at this spot and they want to come get him. And in that case, yeah, I'll consider it. Not something Mickey Loomis does, but I'll consider it. Ashton Genty's off the board, so no one's trading up for Ashton Genty with the Saints. But no, I mean, I think that would fill a hole that the Saints have. Last time they drafted this high, they went away with Marshawn Lattimore. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that you're looking at a cornerback. It probably wouldn't excite people. I don't think cornerbacks get people excited the way an edge rusher would, the way a wide receiver would. But I do think it's a very important part of your defense. And I kind of see him as, Brandon Staley with the Chargers. I kind of see him as that Derwin James guy. He's not a safety, but he kind of does a lot of the same things as a Derwin James. I just think he would be a really good addition and a day one impact player for the Saints. And that's what I'm looking for at this spot.
Definitely tough physical guy, good football IQ. And, we're going into a year, we knew Marshawn gone, but, with Paulson and Debo not re-signing here, you're left with Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid now as your main 2 corners. And I like some of the additions that, the Saints are able to bring back some guys, but I don't mind this pick at all here just because, they need to stock up on that depth at corner again because gone are the days of Marshawn and Paulson. It's kind of weird there.
Right. And so he's a guy who could play inside, outside. Like, you need that flexibility. And the cornerback room is not stocked full.
No.
Like, they were in on Charvarius Ward. They didn't, the deal went away from him. It was very close. So they are very clearly very interested in adding more to this cornerback room. They ended up bringing back Ike Adam, but that's not going to preclude you from going out and drafting a guy. So, I think you're probably going to add a cornerback in this draft somewhere. And the question is, okay, you're going to do it at 9, you're going to do it at 40. But I think this is where you go. Michael Williams is on the board here. So if you wanted an edge rusher, you could do that. Shamar Stewart, Mike Green, like the next 3 picks are edge rushers. So you would be sacrificing an opportunity to add to that group. But I don't know. Like, I don't like the idea of going into a season with that thin of a cornerback group and that unproven of a cornerback group. When I can add a day one nickel corner right here. Tyler Warren's still on the board. I know a lot of people are going to be excited about Tyler Warren. And maybe the Saints are too. I don't see it. Will Johnson is the other guy I was looking at the cornerback position, but it's tough to see If I'm going corner, I like Jade more than I like Will. Ted McMillan in this mock goes all the way down at 18.
Wow.
That's a drop. That's a pretty steep drop for him, but I don't know. Wide receiver's tough. And if that's the case, that means that he is the first wide receiver off the board. That means 17 picks went off the board before a single wide receiver, which is not typical. Yeah. But I do think it's kind of telling, like, this wide receiver class is not as strong as it typically would be. I think there's a lot of really good depth options at wide receiver, but I don't think you have that. You have a lot of those strong X receivers that are going to be having people falling over to come get them.
I was surprised to see, just saw that on social media that Steve Smith, former Panthers receiver, said that Ted McMillan, he's not the number one guy for him at wide receiver this year. Feels he's just a jump ball wide receiver. I was like, damn, all right, Steve Smith.
I think Steve is resentful toward big guys. That's my theory. Is Steve is always going to be a little more hypercritical on the big guys because he was a little guy.
Fair enough, right?
So we'll see. He didn't run the 40 that probably people wanted to see. He was in the mid 4.5s, but I mean, he's 6'6", right? Like, he's a big dude. Like, I don't need that. Like, he's not burning anyone anyway. It's more about the agility for him. So I don't take as much issue with the speed, the top end speed, but he still wasn't my pick here. Okay. Going on down, I'm not going to go through all these picks again the way he did before, but Tyler Booker is the first guard off the board. Like I said, I don't think he's a Saints guy. Maxwell Harrison's interesting, cornerback out of Kentucky. If you didn't go corner at number 9, he would be a guy I'd be looking at. Obviously he's not on the board. Jaden Higgins, first wide receiver off the board in the second round. He goes to the Browns. Derek Harmon, your guy TJ Sanders off at 35. Jack Besh off at 36 to the Jaguars. Tyreek Williams, defensive tackle, goes to the Raiders at 37. Gray Zabel to the Patriots at number 38. He's a guy who really kind of jumped his stock through the roof at the Senior Bowl. And again, if he's on the board, and I am looking hard for a guard. I didn't mean to rhyme there. That is what I am doing right now. I am scouring these picks, seeing, okay, who's available for me at guard. And if that guy's there at 38, and Gray Zabel is a guy now, he doesn't have the physical attributes that the Saints would typically look for at the guard spot. He's not one of those elite athletes that you would typically go for. So maybe that prevents them from pulling the trigger and trading up. Like, I don't think you desperately need that to draft a guy, but if you're going to that level of commitment and actually trading up for a guy, I don't think you're going to go outside of your prototypes or your archetypes, whatever you want to call. But he goes off the board at 38. Now, Azare Thomas, cornerback, goes to Florida State at number 39, and we're on the board at number 40. Yeah, and I make a very big reach based on what PFF has to tell me, and I go with Jonah Savanaya. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly. I think I am. Tackle. He's listed as a tackle. He's a guard prospect out of Arizona. He's a guy who can play guard, can play tackle. I put another Polynesian dude next to Taliesin Fuaga at left guard, and I feel good about it, right? And what Jonah has for me in this role is he fits the mold to a T of hyper athletic guards, right? He ran a 4.97 40-yard dash, which is a pretty impressive time for a 6'4", 324-pound dude, right? 29-inch vertical leap, 9 foot, 8 feet 10 on the broad jump. He's got 33.8-inch arms, which at the guard spot isn't as important, but it does, if you do have designs on potentially moving him out to tackle in the future, definitely there. Big hands, strong dude. He can move. I just think that's the type of player I want to put next to Taliesin Fuaga, kind of create that tandem on the left side of the line for the future, right? Like, I am building through the lines. Now, there wasn't really a guy on the board that I liked at number 9. I really like this guy at number 40. Now, PFF's going to tell you that this is a terrible pick because they had him as like their 90th prospect. I had to search for him in their box because I was like, where is he? But I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, some of these changes they have made don't make sense to me. And you kind of can see, okay, Shedeur Sanders really fell off a cliff, and for PFF, he goes number 42 overall to the Jets. I didn't take him in the second round because I don't think I don't think Shedeur is a bad quarterback, but I don't think he's great either. I think he's as Cam Jordan would put it, he's a jag. He's just a guy, right? Like if he wasn't Deion's son, we would not be talking about him the way we're talking about him, and nothing against Nepo babies, but I'm not drafting a Nepo baby just to draft a Nepo baby. That's mean. I shouldn't say that. But either way, like, I don't know. I just don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see him. I don't see Jackson Dart. I think this is a draft where there's one elite starting quarterback and then a bunch of developmental guys. And every year we go into the quarterback class and we look at it and we try to convince ourselves that there's 2, 3, 4 of these guys. Some years there are. Some years there is a Bo Nix and there is a JJ McCarthy and there is a, I named the 2 guys that I'm least sure about in that class. There is a Michael Penix and there is, Jaden Daniels and Drake May and Caleb Williams. Sometimes classes have that. But in the classes that don't have that, people still, and this scouts still, teams still try to imagine that there's always going to be 2 or 3 starting caliber quarterbacks in every draft class. And it's just not always the case. People convince themselves Kenny Pickett was a guy. I listened to people unironically try to convince me that Malik Willis was a first round pick. I watched the guy for 10 minutes. I was like, that's not a first round pick. Like, even just the throwing motion alone, like, what is this? Like, that's like, maybe in like 2 to 3 years he can start, but this is not a first round pick, right? The EJ Manuel draft is like, yeah, he's not really a first round pick either, but we're going to all convince ourselves that he's the best quarterback available. So he has to be a guy, and it's not always the case. So I don't know.
No, we're seeing,
I'm not taking shit.
Have problems too with the QB they picked, Richardson.
Yeah, right. Everyone convinced themselves Anthony Richardson was a top 5 pick. Like,
relax.
Yeah, maybe if you got him in the second round, the where he should have gone, and weren't committed to starting him on day 1 the way you were committed when you take a guy in the top 5, that he would have a chance. Like the Titans, the Colts, the same colors. The Colts, I mean, like, do they feel like they have a quarterback there? I feel like they're kind of like on the fence of like, hey, we put a lot of money, we put a lot of investment into this.
No, so who did they just bring in as the backup to compete with them?
Daniel Jones.
There you go. Duh. Yeah.
So like, they want to sign Daniel Jones, and I don't think Daniel Jones is signing there unless he feels like he's got a legitimate shot to play.
Right.
I think he would have had options, and the Colts were not the only option. So I don't know. Like, I don't think Anthony Richardson's a bad quarterback. I just think he's a developmental quarterback that was drafted as if he's a day 1 franchise quarterback, because teams want to convince themselves that those are always there, and they're just not always there. I do buy that Cam Ward is that guy. And, Cam Ward, if he really likes the Saints, he'd love to play for the Saints, which I hate that. It's so stupid. Like, why do we even ask people these questions? Like, oh, now the Saints should go trade up for him because he likes the Saints.
Right. To create nonsense buzz that people will click on.
I guess we're bored, but
I like your pick here, though, just because we've talked about it. That interior of the O-line needs to be addressed for sure. And if we got a Polynesian connection, let's go for it.
Anyway, I don't know. Like, I like the idea of building my lines. I don't buy this idea that this would be a reach. I don't. I do that he is, at this point in the draft with the guys on the board, he is easily the top interior lineman available. And for whatever reason, PFF doesn't like him. But this is where I'm going. And anyway,
reading some quick online stuff too. Love the fact they talk about a lot about the durability of this dude stands out.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to like. And Arizona has produced some pretty solid offensive linemen over the last few years. So it's a program that I trust. So the guy I was a little skeptical. The next closest pick I had was Josh Connerly, but I'm looking for a guard here, and I think Jonah translates to guard a lot more than Josh does. And if I'm looking for someone to replace Trevor, then Josh might be that guy. But right now I'm really in the guard market, so we'll see. Quinshon Judkins goes off the board to the Cowboys at number 44. I really want a running back in this draft, but I'm not going to force it. Landon Jackson, who was my second round pick last mock, he goes off to the Bengals at number 49. I think edge rusher is a position that I felt like Landon Jackson fit really well when it was a 3-4-3 that I was talking about. In a 3-4, I'm not sure I buy it. I think he's a little too stiff to play that 3-4 role. Travion Henderson goes off at 50 to the Seahawks. So another running back, Jackson Dart, drops all the way to 52 to the Seahawks, which the Seahawks picked twice in 3 picks.
That seems more accurate to me, at least.
Yeah, and I think that's the Geno Smith trade coming to roost there. I think that's what that is those 2 picks. Shavon Revel goes to the Bucks at number 53. That would be a drop for him. Scrolling down, Xavier Estrepo goes to the Commanders at number 61. Another weapon for Mr. Daniels. Braden Swinson, edge rusher out of LSU, goes to the Eagles at number 64. Going down, Elijah Arroyo goes off at 67, tight end. Cam Skattebo, your guy, goes off at 68. So not on the board for me. Omar Norman Lott, who was, I think, your second round pick last time.
Right.
He goes off the board at 65. So 71 Saints on the board. Ding, 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 ding. And I get myself the local guy. I guess not really the local guy, but the LSU guy, Mason Taylor, tight end out of LSU. Like we talked about it, like I signed Juwan Johnson to a 3-year contract. That's not going to stop me from adding to my toolbox at tight end. Like I am perfectly happy with Juwan in terms of what he's capable of doing, but I'm still developing guys behind him. Like, again, that's a 3-year contract that is effectively a 2-year contract if you decide to move on. So I'm taking this guy saying he's my tight end of the future. Juwan is my tight end of the now. He's 28 years old. Like it takes some time for tight ends to develop at the NFL level. So I feel perfectly good about it. I like the idea that if a guy gets hurt, I have a top end option behind him. Tight end is a position that I feel like the Saints have really neglected over the last several years. 3rd round tends to be where they go after them when they do. So, I dig it. And, in the past, I would say, hey, the Saints aren't drafting LSU players. They've proven it. They don't do it. Well, they still haven't, right? They still haven't drafted LSU players. Like Will Clapp is still the most recent LSU player they've drafted. He was a 7th rounder. But I think what we have seen over the past few off seasons is this kind of erring away from local guys has very much changed, right? Like they don't do that anymore. Like clearly there is not the qualms about bringing in local ties are not there like they used to be with, Justin Reed and Devon Godshaw, Tyrann Mathieu, Foster Moreau. Like you've gotten more and more comfortable bringing these guys in. Will Clapp. And so Mason Taylor's next on that list for me, and I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, love boosting the tight end position. You mentioned, you inked Juwan, but still needs plenty of attention there. You got injuries, and just the fact that, I love Taylor, the player. Think that he's going to be pretty darn good in the NFL, and I'm not sure if this is considered a big drop for him, but it seems really late for him to be available in the mock.
I think 3rd round is a good spot for him. I could see him going off the board earlier, but I wouldn't be stunned if he ends up here. You also probably get Jason Taylor to come hang around the team, which is probably not a terrible thing. You get a NFL Hall of Famer come hang out with your defensive line group for a little bit, I'm
sure Cam would love that.
All right, moving on. I'm not going to go through these picks, but Dylan Sampson, halfback off the board to Tennessee. I genuinely, I'm going to be honest with you. We are this far down in my mock draft. I don't even know who it is. I'm going to be as surprised as you are when this name pops up because I did this so long ago that I actually forgot who I drafted. But Jalen Milroe, if he was on the board for this next pick, I probably would have taken him. He goes off at 78 to the Cardinals. This is where, if I didn't take him at 71, I'm probably, if he's still there at the next pick, I would consider him at 71. I thought Mason Taylor was too good of a value where he was to pass on him for a very much a developmental quarterback. Kyle Kennard goes off at 82 to the Seahawks, defensive end, edge rusher out of South Carolina. We're scrolling. Lathan Ransom, which is a fun name. I would endorse drafting a guy named Lathan Ransom. just because it's fun.
Definitely sounds like it'd be a bad guy in a James Bond movie or something.
Yeah. He's a safety, so he'll be a ball hawk. He's gonna steal your prized possession, which is the football, and he's gonna sell it back to you for way above market. Anyway, Marcus Mbow, which is another fun name, goes to the Rams out of Purdue. There's your guy Wyatt, tackle out of West Virginia, goes to the Ravens at number 91. So we are getting close to the Saints pick. Charles Grant out of William and Mary. You don't see a lot of William and Mary pros. Goes to the Seahawks at number 92 and number 93.
Bing, 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 bing.
There it is. My guy, Deion Walker, defensive tackle.
Yeah, you've definitely been talking him up since Senior Bowl, or even before.
Yeah, but he has kind of fallen down the board, right? If he I mean, he's a guy that I think I really like his qualities. I really like his measurements. I really like his ability. I don't know if you see it all the time. And I think that's why he's starting to fall out of favor a little bit. Like, I think he was being talked about as a second round pick when we did these mocks the first time. I didn't take him, I don't think. No, I took Landon Jackson. But he was kind of right in that range of like, okay, this is a defensive tackle that makes a lot of sense. If I can get him in the 93, that's I'm doing that, right? Because I think he's a guy that I'd love to just put in a system and say, hey, we're going to develop you to be our long-term nose tackle. Yeah, we traded for Devon Gotcha. He's going to play this year, but you're going to stand behind him and learn, and we're going to be able to see you standing behind him because you're 6'7" and you're a lot taller than he is. But no, I mean, like, I think he is a perfect system defensive tackle, nose tackle. It's a little bigger than you would typically be looking for a nose tackle, but I'm okay with that. I just need him to develop those skills. And, like if I was taking him in the second round, even the early in the third round, I'd be, feel like there's a lot of prospects on the board. Right here, he's just the best option available at a position I really want to build.
He's got the power. He's got that juice for the pass rush, and definitely like adding pressure to the interior.
Yeah, this is the other guy. If I had not gone with Jahdae Barron at 9 overall, I probably would have gone for Dorian Strong here at 97. Or not 97, but at 93. He goes off the board at 97 to the Vikings. Honestly, even with Jahdae, I'd still consider taking another cornerback here. Like, the Saints have always been a team that operates on the philosophy of you can never have too many cornerbacks. And I think it's correct. Every year, everyone's like, wow, why draft this guy? We already have these guys. And then you look at what happens throughout the course of the year, and suddenly you're playing with like your fourth and fifth corners. You're like, we can't win. Like, yeah, because you didn't have enough corners, right? And I thought Dorian, he really impressed me at the Senior Bowl. Like, he needs to bulk up a little bit. I think he needs to get a little more physical, but his length, his speed, I watched him go stride for stride with guys downfield, and he wasn't even exerting himself. He was just like casually matching and mirroring routes to the point that there was one ball that got, I don't think it got completed. I think it technically would have been out of bounds. It would have been a college completion because I think he got 1 foot in, but like, he was in such good coverage that he wasn't even like paying attention for the ball. And I think this is what happens to corners in one-on-one reps sometimes is, it's like, I won this. Like, they're not, the ball's not in a game. The ball's not coming here. Right. Whereas in a one-on-one drill, the ball's coming either way. And I think what happens sometimes with these corners is they're just like, I crushed this coverage. Like, there's no way this ball is getting completed to the point that he doesn't even turn around and look for the ball. And it just like gets dropped in a bucket over him. And all he had to do was like put his hand up and maybe even intercepts it. But like in this instance, it was like, I have perfect coverage. Anyway, I just thought, I think that's interesting. If like we watch these one-on-one reps and a receiver makes a spectacular catch, and we talk about the receiver catch and we talk about the throw, and we don't consider that throw is never getting made in a game because the guy's blanketed, right? Like, no quarterback in their right mind is going to even throw that ball, but something crazy happens, and that's what we get excited about. So
Jameis might throw it.
Sure. Right. But at the end of the day, the cornerback's in perfect coverage, so he should get the credit, not the receiver who makes an incredible catch on a ball that never gets thrown. Anyway, That's where I am. So Dorian Strong would be, if I decided, hey, I'm okay at the D tackle spot, if I maybe take a D tackle earlier in the draft, he's a guy I'm looking at. Anyway, that's it. That's what I got. What do you think? What are you thinking, Steve?
After the first round, it's really tough, to see or think about how the draft shakes out. But overall, I think the picks that both of us made obviously can be factors for the Saints right away. And I'll be curious to see, though, if they lean a little bit more offense or defense going into the draft. You would think with an offensive coach that maybe you do lean a little more to that side of the ball, but we'll see how Kellen Moore operates here. I just know that right now the Saints are definitely thought about low around the NFL. And I don't know. I just feel like the team's not going to be out of the running in the NFC South because the division is what it is. I'm not saying, they're making a deep playoff run here, but I will say I wouldn't be surprised if you see a little boost from this squad going into year one with Kellen Moore, just because there is still talent here. I do believe that.
Yeah, I'd like how they've navigated this offseason. I do, because I don't like this idea that you're going to go in the tank and you're going to try to lose. Like, teams can't operate that way. But I think they have been smart and judicious about how they've operated. You're going to go and try to find some key contributors in the draft, and you're going to try to hit like you did in 2017. And hopefully, obviously that's a pretty high bar to clear, but anything close to that is a success. Like, I want to get 2 to 3 quality players, at least 1 top end starter, 2 starters, ideally. And that's what you're going to try to do. And then you're going to come out the other side and you're going to be in a much better cap situation. Like, the Saints have cap space right now and cap space next year. That almost never happens.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's going to be a Derek Carr question, and that's going to be a significant chunk next year if you end up having to deal with it. But either way, that's what it is. So if you look at, like I said, PFF hates my mock, and I'm happy about that, because when PFF likes my mock draft, I feel like I did something wrong, because it's just like I just took the players they told me, because I disagree with, like, they have Jonah Savaiinaea at 86. I have him in the high second round range. Like, I don't buy that for a second. That's an F pick. But they gave me an F, which, like, grade me based on something other than like your big board, and we'll see how we go. Anyway, they gave me a C+. We
talked about it anyway. There were definitely questions about their big board, just going through our mocks, and I was like, I couldn't believe a few players where they ended up slotted here. So who knows where this crapshoot happens.
Yeah, I'm about consistency, but there's a point where I'm just like, maybe we should try a different big board.
Exactly.
Maybe we should try someone else's draft strategy. But all right, that's it. It's going to be mock draft 2.0. We'll put a pin in it for a couple weeks, come back as we get closer to the draft and maybe update this. I do want to do at least one mock where we execute a trade. We'll have one of us trade up, one of us trade down, and see how that looks. But that's going to be a little bit down the line. We're kind of collecting. We're in the mode of collecting interviews with all these new Saints free agents. So we'll start filtering those in the future episodes. Also have some ideas for some future podcasts with some other voices. So we'll get into that as we go. But this is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Thanks, everyone, for hanging around. Thanks to the person working on my porch for taking a lunch break. And otherwise, we'll get right back into it starting next week. And good stuff.
Who dat, everyone?
Who dat?